So I'll give you some background. Lior Hayat is, for now, is the Director Deputy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Department of North America. He served in many senior positions, including in Miami, the city where I was born. So let's not talk about Miami. So the international department, Dr. Shira Efron, she's the head of the Faculty of Policy of Israel. She's an expert on Middle Eastern affairs and brings with her years and years, decades of experience. And analysis of research and analysis of policies, that's her expertise. In 2016 until 22, she was the head of RAND project of Israel, and recently Shira served as the research director and a senior fellow in the Institute Eldad Shavit. He is a brigadier general at reserve, and he joined the INSS in 2017 after a lengthy career in the intelligence service and Mossad. His last role in the intelligence was an assistant of assessment of the research department, and in Mossad he was the head of a research department from 2011 till 2015. And last but not the least, Dr. Colonel Shay Har-Zvi. He's a senior researcher in the Strategic Institute of Reichman University, former Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Matters, and recently he serves from March 2025, of course, as the international strategist of the Families of the Hostages headquarters. So in this panel, we'll be very much focused on interests. And it's extremely important to mention that we are facing a crucial period of time. The Israeli interest in the United States traditionally, and American interests here, were based on matters such as promotion of alliances with countries with democratic values and importance of values, importance of the United States preserving the liberal order. And now we are at a different period of time. And one of the things we want to examine is how will it impact Israel directly. So Eldad mentioned in his opening the national security strategy of the US, and in this document, the administration also notes the reduction of interest of Middle East and the importance of Middle East for national security of the United States. And they look at this area as a place of business, and I'm quoting, "It is no longer a constant irritant and a potential sort of catastrophes." Famous last words. Let's see how will it unfold from now. But again, first of all, let's open with Lior. When we started to talk before the panel, you told me that, listen, the bilateral interests of Israel and USA are values, interests, and politics, VIP. We should try to reduce friction on politics and focus on interests and values. So here we talk about interests. So allow me to ask you, how Israel can reinforce and deepen its strategic value in the eyes of administration that is actually looking at American interests first. America first, as we said. So can you hear me as well? Perfect. So Jesse, congratulations for your PhD. I know that you deserve it. And thank you for inviting me. And the credit goes to Ran Lerman. Dr. Ran Lerman taught me VIP concept, values, interest, politics, which is the foundation of relationship between Israel and the United States. And I think that our interest, in fact, if I'm analyzing, according to my understanding, obviously, this group, we would like to reduce the weight of politics, American politics, and we can talk about that in depth, and I'm sure that one of the panels will be dedicated to the political change in the United States and the status of Israel. And of course, we remain, and the Israeli politics should be reduced. One of the only things maybe that are bipartisan in Israel is the importance of connection to the United States, regardless very different understanding of reality by two parties. But values, that was always, at least in the very beginning, at least publicly, as the head of the connection between the United States and Israel, shared values of the United States and Israel. When Israeli diplomats served in the United States, we usually use this very often, this term at least, but we can see now, based on the document, a fascinating document, in my opinion, of national security strategy that has been published 2 weeks ago. Values are not necessarily the top of the priority of the current administration. And I really don't know how will it continue, but at least for the next 3 years, values will not be the main dish. So that's why we need to focus, first of all, on interests. And here we need to know how to understand two things. First of all, what are the American interests in general, not just in the Middle East, and how Israel can become an asset for the United States in order to help it to realize the full potential of the American interest. There is a lengthy string of things we do already. Israel is an asset for the United States. It's a strategic asset that allows the United States to be a superpower in the Middle East, maybe the most important superpower in the Middle East, without investing what the superpowers need to invest usually, which is soldiers. There are no American soldiers, almost no American soldiers that are currently in the Middle East. And this particular part of the equation is fulfilled by Israel. We are a strategic asset for the United States. They can actually show its strength and power, if I will be properly using this term in Hebrew. And from the other hand, at cost that is minimal relatively, or lower cost at least. In addition, Israel is a technological superpower. It's intelligence superpower. We have people that are well familiar with this topic, much better than I. The United States gains knowledge from Israel, intelligence knowledge from Israel, that would have taken them, at least according to the Americans, much more American efforts and resources to obtain without investing those resources in intelligence. And the United States can show its superiority, military superiority. While the country that uses American technologies and platforms show this superiority in the Middle East versus the enemies of the United States. And this is something that is important to highlight here. So there are two things. Israel is strategic value for American interests, and Israel is an alliance of the United States, but it's not enough. It's not enough for two reasons. We saw the priorities, the new priorities of the United States. And here the question is, what can we do more? How can we become a relevant presence for America in places where they are not present, in strategic points though? Latin America. I don't have all answers, obviously, but the moment the United States defined the Western Hemisphere as the most important place for the America, we need to look at it and say, okay, how can it become the most important place for us to show our asset value for the United States? And same goes for Europe, really. From a European point of view, actually, if I read correctly, this document, the United States expect its allies to invest significant amounts of money into their security, and I think we definitely stand out pretty well in this particular aspect. And Asia and Africa as well, and other regions of the world that are mentioned in the American strategy. In the end of the day, I think that the last part is visibility, optics, and this is where we need to tell the story, and Dad mentioned that before. We need to tell the story of Israel-American alliance in a different way, in the way that addresses the American audience, and mostly MAGA crowds, into MAGA, America First. If we see the difference in MAGA, America First movement, and classic MAGA, the more right, isolistic fraction, to explain that America, because of this connection with Israel, United States is a superpower because of it. Not just because of it, obviously, let's become slightly more humble than we are usually, but the connection with Israel helps the United States to remain an international superpower. In the end of the day, that's what this document actually says. And this document says the United States is a superpower. There are areas of interest where the United States wants to be relevant and ruling, the only one that will be impacting the Western Hemisphere. There are allies We have allies all over the world. We want to be in charge or partners in their security. And in certain areas of interest where we're willing to invest military, but it mentions Asia, but we can also translate it into the Middle East, I think. And in the end of the day, America first. As Israel, we can help America to become first. So thank you, Lior. Shira. Eldad and myself, we mentioned the importance of the document of national strategy. And it's a groundbreaking document that is supposed to navigate the national strategy of this administration. So I'd like to ask you a question. We see the decline of the Middle East on the ladder of priorities, and we can actually see significant changes in deployment of forces of the United States. There's still a national defense strategy that's supposed to be published within a month and a half from now. So I would like to ask you, how do you perceive those potential changes, and how will it impact our bilateral relations? So hi, Jesse. Hi, all. Congratulations for your PhD. Indeed, Jesse. I'm extremely happy to be here, and I understand this is a place that is my home. I feel very much at home here. I even could use the parking that recognizes my up plates. So much expertise in this room, so hopefully it will be more of a discussion. Obviously, I hope we'll have a Q&A as well. I think we need to define what is national security strategy, because I think sometimes they address it more importance than it is. The administration is not volunteering to write it. There is a mandatory duty, and Trump's administration as well did it because that dictates budgets. This document has been written 1 year after the administration starts to work and until it's been published. So based on the behavior of the administration, we know more or less where they go. So again, obviously, this document has 4 different audiences. Obviously, one of them is the Congress. This is the most important part, of course. And then they are constituents of the president and his party in order to say, you remember what we promised you in the campaign, so we're still loyal to our word. And thirdly, obviously, the employees of the governments, embassies, and etc., though they know exactly where the wind blows. And the fourth one are foreign governments. And I think this is not necessarily something they consider when they write it. But if you look at this document, obviously, Europeans are panicking. The Middle East can actually breathe lightly. They're not going to be preached and educated, etc. And other countries can try to find their path within this document. It's a very short document. It's easy to read. Everything in Trump is, okay? There are no surprises, a lot of benefits here. Previous documents, the language is always very complicated, and all the challenges of the world, not to hurt anyone, to include all the topics. Here is very clear what they care about and what is not mentioned. Very different from national security strategies of previous administrations and very different from the first Trump's administration. It was a groundbreaking document, definitely, in 2015. But again, the previous one was a groundbreaking one by defining China, the great power competition. All of our ways of thinking really changed. Now we can see a renewed Monroe doctrine. Instead of Europeans don't come to us, others stay at home. And he also reflects a lot of tension within administration. I can tell you my friends that work in Pentagon said, well, they didn't write a lot about Chinese because of the tension between different voices. Well, ultra-separatists and those that are more hawkish. So more hawkish voices are also being heard. The Western Hemisphere, for example, we see here. It's very important for MAGA, of course, because of drugs and immigration, but you can see also the fingerprints of Marco Rubio, and he cares about this topic, and you can see it in the draft of this document. And of course, it's important to mention as well, when it comes to China, is framed as an economical challenge, but there are also questions of the islands. China is mentioned as economical challenge, but also without being named. They are mentioned in Latin America, which is a very important area that has been neglected before. When it comes to the Middle East, I think there are 30 pages of the document, and the Middle Eastern part is not long, but it's not in compliance with the investment of the administration. He was here twice. He brought a ceasefire. There are teams working in Lebanon. He removed sanctions on Syria. He imposed sanctions on Iran, agreements and investments with the Gulf countries, changes in approach to technologies, and etc. So I have to say that I see that there is a different proportion of importance to the Middle East, whether their presence will change here or not. What is clear that the assumptions and why they actually talk about the Middle East as less demanding area, they don't hold water. The decrease of dependence on energy, but energy is still a big deal. They don't talk about geography. They don't talk about the fact that the Middle East will continue, whether they want it or not, will continue to obviously attract their attention, and GPC as well. They maybe don't care about Russia in the Middle East, but this is a bit of a topic that will continue to become still very important and to preoccupy them. The part I think that is very interesting when it comes to the Middle East, to talk about the burden sharing. There's an expectation that American allies will do a lot to defend themselves, obviously Europe. But in the Middle East, it's not mentioned. There's no burden sharing mentioning because they didn't want to touch Israeli topic, because in MAGA, it's a topic that is actually quite provocative and disputable. But if it's not a problem now, let's not touch it. In American mainstream, it's still not a problem. I'm sure we'll talk about the facts that are changing now, but still, I think Trump himself, as far as we understand from people around him, he doesn't really reflect the opinion of the separatists or opinion of more hawkish crowd. He depends on which side of the room. He's a very contrarian. Near Vance, he'll be more hawkish. Near Colby, he'll be more actually isolationist. He cares about Israel, for sure. There is a connection. That is true. He has a connection to Qatar and the Gulf countries and the Saudis, obviously. What will happen after Trump? That's another question. The deployment of forces. Today we talk about numbers of 35,000 American soldiers in the region. There's quite a consensus that the number will be lower. There are also changes that they don't talk about. The CENTCOM change, the CENTCOM International Command, AFRICOM, CENTCOM and EUCOM, whether will it change the number of forces on the ground, but it will definitely change the point of focus of attention, but I'm sure that Congress will not necessarily support it. And what it means for Israel, I think we're looking in the short term and we think about that MOU, will they sign it or not? I think it will sign MOU. My opinion is yes. Whether Israel, new systems will emerge from Israel, anti-missile systems, no. I think in the short term, really, and we can see that we are doing okay. But the questions are, and I see the clock actually, so we'll move forward. So the bigger questions will be what will happen with next administrations, Democratic ones, and Republicans as well. And the assumption of ours that we can actually just copy-paste the past in MOU is a wrong assumption. Thank you, Shira. Eldad. So let's turn to you. We all talked about the unprecedented cooperation between Israel and the United States, the American attack, direct intervention, an attack of nuclear sites. Nevertheless, there are also gaps that are emerging between the United States and Israel. We can see that while moving to stage plan B in Gaza, the possible agreement in Syria, maybe an additional attack in Iran. So how would you analyze those gaps that are emerging and how Israel can manage it with the administration? So first of all, I'm obviously completely support everything that's been said, that the United States and Trump's administration are deeply committed to national security of Israel. And they definitely look at Israel as a state that is important, central in the Middle East. And considering that Shira mentioned here, so national security document versus actual policy. Differently from other administrations, they do put their money where the mouth is. This is exactly the policy that we saw in the Middle East. I think the American administration invested a lot of resources into the Middle East during the last year, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And part of the reason they had to do that is to allow them, in fact, to reach other objectives that they have at the top of their priorities in other areas of the world. But war here and then war with Iran pushed them towards this investment. So when we look at the main points of the national security strategy as published when it comes to the Middle East, and not just the Middle East really. There are points of issues, a lot of issues that clash. In some of those cases, they clash with Israeli interests, some to a certain extent and some significantly. In many different contexts, on the conceptual level, I would say, obviously on the practical level as well. So, of course, we can talk about the long term, but in the Middle East, it's a short term that will be impacting the long term, and we are right now in the early stages of emerging reality that will be creating a significant gap, to my opinion, between the vision of Trump's administration and Trump's personal vision and the security needs of Israel. We can see it almost every day. Though both of the countries try to blur it, and the Americans don't really oppose. One of the lessons, I think, actually, the lesson maybe, or something they learned from Biden administration is not to publicly actually present the disagreements with Israel, because I think in each of those main security issues that preoccupy today Israel, there is a gap between Israel and American interests. And this gap was created since it emerged because, as it's written in the strategy, so recently the administration definitely sees itself as succeeding in the Middle East. Trump said, we succeeded. And he constantly says that again and again. All his speeches about it in Gaza, obviously, and in Iran, and his favorite Syrian president, Ashara. And by the way, in Lebanon, this is the least critical arena when it comes to the gaps. I think Israel has more levy and freedom of operations than in other arenas. Gaza, Iran, and Syria, this is where we are quite constrained. And the administration definitely sees a certain type of reality and sees a success in very different terms, really, than Israel. The hostage agreement in Gaza and the ceasefire and the complete eradication of the nuclear project of Iran. And this experiment of taking declared terrorists and turning him into a founder of a democratic state. This is something that serves American interests, but it doesn't serve the security interests of Israel, and we see that. We see that in Gaza when the main gaps, are connected to the aims that Israel set for itself, the demilitarization of the zone. Who will be ruling Gaza? The administration don't care about those details. They want to turn it into a vision. And the vision is detailed, presented. When we see what they want to obtain there versus the Saudis and new architecture and normalization, etc., I don't have enough time. I think we need to give it an attention and to find solutions as a general attempt to stabilize relationships. I think few last days do show it very clearly. And the publications in Israel about the fact that Iranians renewed the terms of the missile project, and Netanyahu is supposed to bring it up as a central topic of his meeting during Christmas in Florida and Mar-a-Lago. And I think it's more of an Israeli attempt to create here some media spin as well of the new agenda than actual intent. Again, they always say, well, you can't predict Trump. You don't know what he'll do because he did something that we never saw him doing. But I do doubt, really, maybe afterwards I will regret it, but I seriously doubt that Trump will see a reason to reopen and attack Iran again after the nuclear was completely eradicated, according to him, as was the main point, just because of the missile project. Yeah, according to him, obviously. Yeah, I know. This is it's true that America cares about Israel. Israel is important, central in the Middle East, and etc. But we need to see the gaps that are emerging between two countries when it comes to security needs of Israel. Thank you, Eldad. Shay. Shira and Eldad mentioned burden sharing and the intent of Trump to sell weapons to countries here, Qatar and the Saudis, MBS visiting the White House last month. So my question to you, the quality military advantage of Israel, which is the core of our national security. How Israel, within this turmoil, can preserve the QME if the government wants to sell advanced weapons to countries in the region? What Israel can do, how can we navigate that and to preserve such crucial point of our national security? So first of all, thank you again for inviting me. And since we don't have much time, two main statements. First of all, President Trump is deeply committed to the security of the State of Israel, no doubt about that. If there are gaps, we need to highlight it constantly all the time. We saw that with certainty from 20th of January when it comes to Iranian and Gazan matter hostages, of course, deep and full commitment of President Trump and his administration. The gaps are very significant, though. I think they are much more significant, actually, not necessarily on the Iranian topic, really. I think the most important gap is the Palestinian Authority in both senses, because they're extremely influential upon Gaza thereafter, and a bit more influential. The window of normalization or any kind of dream of normalization, because without something of that sort, a declaration or anything, nothing will happen. Two-state solution has to be declared. Otherwise, we want gas normalization. And I think that when we look at the more expanded point of view of President Trump, one of the things, and he said that very clearly, really, you just need to listen to him. There are no games here, really. He wants peace and quiet, arrangements, deals, agreements and treaties. That's what leads him. That's what guides him. And this vacuum, again, we can see here the Arabic states jumping into this vacuum. Qatar, Turkey, not Arabic country though, but the regional power. An MBS visit in the White House in the middle of last month. I think they touched upon 2 years ago, whether it's actually the alliance, a defense alliance, or weapon deals, or nuclear enrichment, no enrichment. They discussed it many years ago, but then there was some kind of return, and there was a currency, Israeli currency, that they had to pay for to advance normalization. What actually happened now, that we can see recently, in the end of the day, Arabic countries, mostly the Gulf countries, promote the connections, bilateral connections with the United States on very, very sensitive issues for Israel, without any need to go through and to park in Jerusalem, and then carry on to Washington. But they just opened a direct line for very sensitive and deep trillion-dollar corporations. And they came and said, why only 600 million? Let's put 1 billion. And this is exactly what Trump wants. And the weapons deals, indeed, obviously, we can see that things are pouring into F-35, for example. It's not just the Saudis. And obviously, we shouldn't forget about the Gulf countries, the Emirates. Americans stopped it because they're concerned that this technology will be leaking into Chinese hands. But F-35 is obviously the Saudis, now it's Qatar, and it's Turkey. I don't think we're naive, and if Saudis will get it, Qatar and Turkey will be left behind. We also know that Erdogan is trying to return the S-400 to the Russians. So there is quite a challenge, a significant challenge for Israel here. Obviously, we're not supposed to look at it just from the QME perspective. We have much more expanded approaches of Trump. How do you expand and deepen bilateral connections with the countries of the region? What leads you in the end of the day is economical matters, deals, and that's what is attractive. And obviously, stability. I completely agree with Eldad on the Iranian issue, but again, as it's too early, we'll have enough time to talk about that and analyze it. But obviously, there is an undermining or a threat of undermining of the quality advantage of Israel. It's not just the United States. We'll not talk about the Chinese context, technologies, etc. But there are a lot of expanded concepts and superpowers and other countries all over the world, what they're willing to provide without any restrictions that even further reinforce the challenges, AI and etc. So I think that what can be the Israeli solution in the end of the day, we need to see the interests, the joint interests. How can you relate to the regional expanded processes of President Trump? Because in the end of the day, if it will not happen, the rest of the processes will be that bilateral cooperation between the Arabic countries and the United States will just become more and more of a standard procedure. If there will not be any normalization, and we don't see how can we currently do that with very rigid conditions of MBS, according to the Prime Minister at least. So Saudis will be continuing bilateral route with the United States. Qatar, we know the defense agreement and the special status. Turkey, this is Israel and Turkey hostility. Erdogan and Trump, they have actual friendship. So there are challenges, and therefore Israel has to use one of the ways of how to integrate Israel into this tapestry of region that President Trump tries to promote. Otherwise, this vacuum that already emerged will be used by other Arabic countries to promote their bilateral connections with the United States in context of weapon deals and etc. And we've been talking about that for many years already, where Israel can develop some kind of independence in munition and etc. Obviously, F-35 probably will still have to buy from the Americans within 100 years from now, but there are other matters that we can actually do on our own. But on the strategic level, as I said, the key is the integration into more expanded tapestry, interest and strategy of President Trump for the next 3 years. And just 1 year been gone by, and God knows what will happen, especially after the midterm elections, where Trump will be completely free to do whatever he wishes. Almost whatever he wishes. And that's the key, integration into regional processes. Thank you, Shay. So a quick round of lightning round, in fact, I would say, because we don't have much time. So I would like to ask each and every one of you, and let's start with Shira and then move forward. So Shay, I think you gave us here a bit of a taste, really, for the next question. Assets. What does it mean? Actually, how in the long term Israel can increase its level of assets? It is. How can we prove the fact that we're an asset in the eyes of the Americans? So what can we do to become more attractive for them? But NVIDIA chose Israel, which is already great. So, yeah, I think it's very obvious. So obviously, Israel is a perfect ally here. And of course, as we need all the help from Trump's help, he rearranged the Middle East in the way that even serving the American interests, obviously at least for now. So Israel did help them to arrange that. And we need to tell this story again. The more we do, the less they need to do in the region. But there's a bit of a problem here. I think that Tamir was with me and Eyal was with me. Sometimes we hear from the Americans that Israel defends itself on its own, for its own, is not a narrative that works for people that are actually sailing in the Middle East and do things for us. No, people in CENTCOM as well, we need to understand, we need to recognize the support and help and mutual work together. We are allies, we work together, we're the cutting edge, we're easier to do other things, but we recognize the fact we don't do it on our own. We should not lie to ourselves. We're not on our own. And from October 7th, it proved that we're not on our own, not just in money. We need to recognize that and to admit it. And there is obviously technology, and there is another story that I think is a little bit unfair. But there is a bit of an artificial concept of values and interests. I think Dan Shapiro is not here, but it's very difficult to be today a Democrat or supporter of Israel in any sense. And Rotem will talk about that in the next panel, I'm sure. We see what is happening today when the Democratic Party, and by the way, in MAGA as well, and you said we need to explain MAGA that Israel is an asset, but you can't. Who are we to criticize and give up on Democrats? Why are we giving up on Democrats? We should not. We cannot allow it to be solved. There will be a pendulum. There will be a new administration. Jews are democratic. This is a Jewish state. I'm sorry, this is a Democratic Party, it's a Jewish party. We need to talk about that. And we can't see this distinguishment really, because without this connection to the Israeli narrative, that is a collective narrative, we will fail, we won't succeed. I know that people that make decisions in the state of Israel say, yeah, Israel always fell during the war, and then we climb up because they reassess and they appreciate us. I don't think that's the story now. When I see Pete Buttigieg and Cory Booker, how they talk about Israel, I think we feel that there is some kind of luxury to think that whether we want to talk about J Street and AIPAC, no. We need to support anyone who is Zionist and recognize the right of Israel to exist, and then to tell why are we an asset. Just a brief comment, really. If I was misunderstood, really, we don't have to work just with MAGA. No, that's not what I meant. Bipartisan, the foundation of our work as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, we need to look into the long term. So we work for many years with this difficulty, but I'm looking at the short term for now. The administration is looking for stability and investment in the Middle East, and this is our joint interest. It can become our joint interest of Israel and the USA. Look at the Abraham Accords. Classic example of stability and agreements. They contributed tremendously to the stability of the Middle East and brought so many investments in different fields. And we can work hand in hand to expand the Abraham Accords, which is a politically pressing issue. We can become an asset for the United States in this stabilizing function. IMEC, as a header, just to remind you, this transportation energy connecting route from the Gulf or India up to Europe, really. Israel is an important tool in this particular project. And I would like to repeat again, in the end of the day, this chair with 3 legs of values, interests, and politics, every time we rely upon different pillar, but our work in order to preserve the American support of Israel has to rely upon 3 of those pillars at the same time to see the change that will arrive, political change in the United States, because it's a very stable democracy, but we see political changes. And today we need to work in order to preserve American support in next administrations. It's true, I don't think that was the topic of the current panel, but in the end of the day, politicians, democratic politicians, politicians obviously is very different from the public servants. They have concept of interest, and their interests as well, we need to accommodate, and we need to look at their interests as something that can be a value for. In the end, the change between the Democrats and Republicans when it comes to interest is not that significant. Politics is a big difference, obviously, but values, well, we are drifting further and further apart when it comes to values recently. I'd like to say something about the window of opportunities, really. Trump's approach to Israel creates for us a window of opportunity that's very short, I think, in order to establish our value as an asset for a long term. If you won't be able to use this very short period of time that we have, this window of opportunity that opened up for a certain short period of time during the administration of President Trump, that is obviously not necessarily will continue for a long time, because after the midterms, I don't know to what extent we'll be free to do anything we wanted, it depends on the results, really. We must do it now. And one word about the Democrats, we don't have to be bipartisan. We need to work in order to re-establish, to rebuild, to rehabilitate our relationship with Democrats. It's not being bipartisan. We have a lengthy path to get back to the point of bipartisan, been ruined between us and the Democrats for quite a while. So 3 different aspects of actions for Israel. We do need to work as the force multiplier for technology and security of the United States. We have a lot to contribute on technological superiority. We need to be an anchor for the transferring of the regional burden instead of being the one that drags the United States into regional altercations. We need to become the anchor of stability. And we need to look at the political circumstances of the United States and to create a responsible policy when it comes to political and diplomatic initiatives of the United States, an understanding of American interests. If we'll adopt a part of those three of the layers of operations, I think we'll be able to build some kind of long-term foundation. No doubt, I think, absolutely no doubt. I'm absolutely sure that it will be much harder for us with the next president of the United States, and it doesn't matter who will be, whether he'll be a Democrat or will he be a Republican. Talking about the last expressions of J.D. Vance on his VP, that he seems to be a leading candidate of the Republicans for the next elections. No doubt he's not Trump. Obviously, we'll talk about the short term because the other panels will be talking about the long term, and there really, the situation is so complicated and even problematic. I would say we all understand all the in-depth surveys of public opinion in the United States, not just the Republican Democrats, it's older and younger generation. Let's put it aside for a second. When we talk about the short term, United States in June, they started certain period. You can't really intervene. Obviously, it sounds funny, but there is a World Cup. No one wants to have war here during the World Cup. It should not. It definitely should not distract all the resources. Then there is a World Cup, and then there are midterms. So we have very, very, very short window of opportunities, to my opinion, now. No doubt, since October, 8th of October. IDF and the security forces showed amazing capacity. Now this is the diplomatic action. Now this is the time for political intervention. How can you introduce the diplomatic approach that Trump is leading? We need to integrate ourselves, all the successes that he achieved. And now this is the time to realize, obviously, multinational force in Gaza, if it will not be there, or different regime in Gaza, you're going backwards, really. Iran. Israel constantly creates this sense that the Iranians are moving forward with the missile project and the nuclear. This is the time to see how can you actually reap the fruit of your labor. All the actions, everything that Trump did, how can you actually convert it into some kind of political currency, diplomatic currency? If Israel and the leadership of Israel, but if Israel will not know how to integrate itself into it, I think the gaps next week, really, next week we'll see that. No, we should not forget about the visit. I think it's a dramatic visit because all of those issues will be on the table. And we'll need very often to hear the leakage afterwards to try to understand between the lines what actually happened there. But this is the Israeli chance to see how will it actually work hand in hand with Trump. 2028 is an MOU. You need to discuss it already in 2026. Obviously, there are people with a lot of experience in this field. You can't do it months in advance. You need to see how now you will fit the MOU that with the technological changes and concepts and everything of Trump's administration. So this is opportunity, but the gaps, we need to see how to bridge it. There are few issues that I'm not sure that can be bridged really simply, or even if they're actually possible to bridge. So let's wait for all of the leaks from Mar-a-Lago by Barak Ravid, of course. All the news, items, of course. Thank you, the panel, and I will transfer the microphone to the next panel.